Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I hope I'm not the only one that hears bells, right?
Yes.
Okay. It could be a whole different sign of something. It's such a pleasure to be with you this morning. My forecast said we had like a 79% chance of rain this morning. So thank you, Florida. I love that story when I found it. It reminds me, and I grew up in Michigan, I'm going to tell you about that in a minute, but the seasons are so different. And that story is obviously from somebody in New England where they talk about through 4th of July that summer doesn't start till July. And today's the 23rd, as most of you know. Summer officially starts the 21st of June. It's generally the first day of summer. Although I know in Florida, it generally feels like summer started, about the first week of May? February? Yeah, that's not entirely wrong this year. And summer has always been my favorite time of year. And maybe it's because I'm a June baby. My birthday was the 11th. Or maybe it's because school, for me, always let out in June. Like I said, I grew up in Michigan. So we don't go back to school until after Labor Day because tourism in Michigan is a big deal. So everybody's out on the lake until Labor Day. So we don't go back to school until after Labor Day, which means school frequently didn't let out until the second week of June. More than once, the 11th of June, which was my birthday, was also the last day of school, which was always super cool. And I always liked school well enough, but I liked being out of school even more. So summer meant freedom. And my love of summer, therefore, was established very early on. And even as an adult, I still look forward to summer. I like the gradual lengthening of the days, the more daylight, the warmer weather, the greening of the landscape, especially now that it rained for the last 2 days. Yay. And there's watermelon. Because even with all our advances in technology, try and buy a watermelon in December. Well, you can now, but they cost you like $25 and it'll just be around. But because I'm an adult now, summer doesn't automatically mean a vacation like it used to. I have to plan for vacations. I have to save money ahead of time. I have to get leave time approved by my boss. I have to brief my coworkers on my projects because they have to do my work while I'm gone. I have to book airline tickets, and I don't even want to talk about that mess. It's become a heck of a lot harder to get a vacation than just walking off the school grounds at 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon on a June day. So I just got back last Tuesday from a quick 6-day trip to Michigan. Is that me? Or is that you?
I have no
We don't
idea.
know what's going on.
Where's Kirby?
Do I just need to amplify myself? He's hiding in the back somewhere. He's the man in the window right there. So.
I'll be back just a second.
Okay. I just got back last Tuesday from a 6-day trip to Michigan, and it was just me. I left the husband and the stepson at home here in Florida to check the mail, feed the pets, fend for yourselves. And it was a lovely break for me. I've been really overwhelmed at work. I've got several critical projects. I'm a construction manager. They're all delayed for whatever reason. One of our department's employees left abruptly, left the company, and we haven't found a replacement. So those of us left behind have been picking up that person's work. To top it off, we got a new CEO a couple months ago, and the interim has suddenly made sweeping organizational changes which have not only reprioritized our work, but has left everybody just wondering what's going on. We are literally introducing each other. Hi, I'm Jennifer. I work in Facilities Capital today. Because we don't know what we're doing next week. So I was more than happy to shut my computer off, turn my work phone off, and leave last week. My actual reason for going to Michigan was to help my mom on Friday and Saturday with a yard sale to sell off the last of my late father's woodworking tools and equipment. He was also a mechanic, so he had lots of stuff. This was the third yard sale and the last one my mother says. My sister and her husband's family had also contributed the usual sorts of yard sale dreck. Clothes that didn't fit, last year's ski boots, puzzles, the vases that nobody ever buys anyway, and all ended up at Goodwill. And we really did have a fun 2 days of convincing strangers to give us money and take our crap home with them.
Keep talking.
Just keep talking. Okay, he's going to poke me while I'm talking. I'm flexible. So I flew in on Thursday afternoon, which is really nice. There's a direct flight that leaves Jacksonville at about 11 o'clock in the morning. It lands in Detroit at about 2:30 in the afternoon. Which is perfect, because I am against getting up early. I'm not leaving my house at 5 o'clock in the morning on vacation day. I'm going to sleep in, I'm going to go to the airport, I'm going to have a nice flight. And that flight time worked out even better because my sister had managed to get us tickets for the open house of Michigan Central Station at about 5:30 on Thursday evening. So I'm going to assume that none of you know what Michigan Central Station is, because I didn't either. Michigan Central Station was, and still is, the train station in Detroit. And there's an Amtrak station, which is just Amtrak. This is the train station. It originally opened in 1913, and it was designed by some of the same architectural firms that were involved in Grand Central Station in New York City. It's an 18-story building. It's huge, with the same kind of elaborate grand halls that you would expect to find in a train station. And the relatively 16 stories above it were all office spaces. It was abandoned in 1987 and sat empty until about 6 years ago when the Ford Motor Company bought it. Michigan Central Station is in a part of Detroit called Corktown. And there's nothing in Corktown except drab, flat, squatty, one-story warehouses, a lot of abandoned buildings, and parking lots that are more abandoned than the buildings they're adjacent to. So it's just super rundown, super flat. Picture Detroit more rundown than what you're already picturing. My sister Kate's husband traditionally spends Father's Day at their lake house with the other dads, fishing. So my vacation adventure team was my mom, my sister Kate, myself, and my nephew Matt, my sister's kid, who is the wittiest 15-year-old boy I've ever met. He's very quiet, and then he just opens his mouth and says something, you're like, where did that come? Look at Jerry Seinfeld right here, and then he shuts up for another hour. Just these little bon mots out of nowhere. Most of the time he's got his iPods in, so you don't even know that he's registering the conversation. The four of us loaded up in the car after I got off the airplane, and we headed back into the city, faithfully following my mother's GPS to get to this parking garage that was only supposed to be a block away from the train station. And you can see Michigan Central Station from I-75. It's the only 18-story building in like a 5-mile radius because it's in the middle of this squatty, desolate nothing land. And as we get close and we're approaching the exit from 75, the exit's closed. It's not closed, it's not there. There's no exit. Because they're building another bridge across the Detroit River into Canada, and I've forgotten the name of it because I didn't write down. It's named after a hockey player, the Gordie Howe Bridge. Currently, the only way to get into Canada via bridge from Detroit is the Ambassador Bridge. It's been there since the 50s. There's also a tunnel, but if you're in a tractor trailer, of course, you have to go over the bridge. So they're building another bridge that will take all of the tractor trailer off the Ambassador Bridge. You have to go over the Gordie Howe Bridge, which should open in 2 years. But to do this, all of the exits that will take you through that part of Detroit, through Corktown, to get to the Gordie Howe Bridge are being rebuilt because currently they're not built to handle tractor trailers. In this case, the exit we needed to is being completely relocated. So the GPS says to get off at this exit and it's not there because they're moving it a half mile away to account for the radius that a tractor trailer needs. So here's Mom's GPS, rerouting. Meanwhile, we're kind of trying to not stop on I-75 at 5 in the afternoon on a Thursday. And we get off at the next exit. But the whole time we can see the building that we're trying to get to from I-75. And once we get off the freeway, it turned into 2 left turns, and we ended up back on our original route. And 1 more left, and we should be at the parking garage. But wait, there's nothing there but an empty lot. And the train station is 3 blocks away, but it's behind us because we can still see the building. At this point, I get on my phone, and I open Waze, and I put the address in, and a couple more left turns and a couple loop-de-loops around the block, and we end up at the parking garage. And it's a very new, modern-looking 3-story building, but it's almost touching a dilapidated 2-story warehouse next to it. And I'm wondering if we should even park here. But as we come down the road and we pull into where the driveway is into this parking garage, there's a Ford Motor Company security guard sitting in a marked car near the entrance to the parking garage. And the signage as we pull into the driveway to the garage tells us we're in the right spot to park for the Michigan Central Station open house. Okay, everybody starts feeling a little bit better. The signs inside the garage point us towards the elevator lobby, which is in the corner of the garage, and the elevator lobby is air conditioned, which I thought was hilarious, because although it was in the mid-80s in Detroit, which my family thought was just exasperatingly hot for June in Michigan, I thought this was very fancy. We don't air condition elevator lobbies and parking garages in Florida. They thought this was a very good sign that Ford Motor Company had really put the creme de la creme effort into this project. And once we exited the elevators, you had a brief view of surrounding Corktown, which again is dismal. The building across the street literally looked like it had been cobbled together from pieces of machinery and broken block to maintain some semblance of a structure. But as soon as you cross the street, you enter a walkway that bisected the adjacent city block, and it was covered with construction fencing that had banners on it that had these beautiful depictions of what the area will look like when they're done with the revitalization effort. But my sister was able to point out at one spot that there's a 4-story building that Ford has already finished and that people have moved into. They're using it as a small business incubator. And as you walk along, there's these big concrete planters with these big lush plantings in them. And there's strings of lights overhead, giving the whole walkway a very festive atmosphere so that you don't notice the squalor on the other sides of this walkway. And when you get to the end of the walkway, for some reason you arrive at the exit of the tour of the train station, which was a little confusing, but it actually gives you a glimpse of the pop-up gift shop that's at the end. So thank you, Disney, because no matter where you go now, you will exit through the gift shop. On the other side of the street is a concert stage, a festival stage set up, which was left over from the previous weeks. They had a grand opening concert series that featured Diana Ross one night and Jack Black another night, among others. And a few food trucks were still there, because it was about 5:30. They were there to catch the end of the day crowds that were leaving the area. And so we found our way to the front of the building. My sister actually had digital tickets on her phone, which we were able to swipe, and we went into the building. So the tour starts with a quick video overview on this massive, it looks like you're walking up to just this 25-foot screen. Just, it's square, it's gigantic, and then this video plays, I think from inside of it. And it talks a brief history about the building. And then they literally open these doors. Again, it feels like Disney. You walk into the antechamber and they show you the video, then you walk into the next room, and you're free to roam the ground floor of the train station where it's full of exhibits. And there aren't any trains running, although all of the tracks are still there. And they do hope to restore some sort of service from the train station at one point. And since the station had been abandoned for so long, all of the significant architectural features have been removed. Well, that's the nice way to say they've all been stolen. There was a huge community effort to recover these, and these pieces have been scattered literally all over the world. The building was built in 1913. These things had huge cultural value as well as financial value. Some pieces were found in literal museum collections. Some of them were in private collections. In the men's lounge, because at this point in time, remember, there's a women's lounge where the ladies sat to wait for trains, and there was a separate men's lounge where men sat to wait for trains. You didn't sit together. No, that's not how you acted in 1913. In the men's lounge, there had been these huge columns that had these hand-carved mahogany ram's heads at the top of them. They were gigantic. They were this big, giant carved horns on the hand-carved. All of them were gone. Nothing was left. And the only evidence that they were there were photographs of this lounge. They found one of these ram's heads intact in a private collection. And the owner of the collection loaned it to the restoration effort. How nice of them, right? To which my mother said, well, why didn't they just arrest all these people when they found all these people who had all these bits and pieces? And my sister, the lawyer, said, well, it'd be really hard to prove that they were the ones that actually sold it. And once it's been sold multiple times, it'd be really hard to go back and determine who actually stole it. And even though they were in possession and stole it, then we said, Aunt Kate, we appreciate the lawyerly thing, but let's go look at the exhibits. It was amazing. They recreated from that one piece in that private collection all of the ram's heads in the men's lounge. In other places, there were remaining bits of elaborate stone, hand-carved trim over the doors and windows. Those pieces were removed. They scanned them with a laser, and then they recreated those trim pieces with modern methods, with modern engraving tools, or where they lay the plastic down to recreate it and put it back together. Craftsmen from all over the world were commissioned to recreate the marble ceilings, to fill in missing design elements, and reconstruct the elaborate chandeliers, some of which are only bits and pieces of. Anywhere that original material remained, it was restored. When you walked into the grand hall, the ceiling is a herringbone of pieces of marble, and all the marble that was there when they bought the building is still there, and they went back and added pieces to restore it. Anywhere that the floor tile was still there, they added pieces. Where the benches were gone, they poured terrazzo to fill in the holes. But as you stand there and look at the polished marble on the floor, they tell you where you see the divots in the floor is where the people's shoes had worn from sitting on the benches over the years. And they decided to not fill those in because they were a testament to how many people had sat on the benches and their feet had worn treads, grooves into the marble on there. And they weren't big enough to trip anybody. And you had to kind of tip your head a little and look, but they had buffed that floor, that marble floor back up. It was amazing. A cohort of about 25 young people from the Detroit area were given the opportunity to train under the craftsmen that had been brought in to work on this project, to learn both the antique, the hand methods, and the modern skills that were used on this restoration project. And they actually worked on the project. And they now all have these skills to continue these traditions into the modern world. It took so much talent to bring this majestic building back to life. And the exhibits include items from the original train stations, lost and found, bags, umbrellas, newspapers from the 40s and beyond. There were pictures of the original train station restaurant that would later become a favorite site for the graffiti artists that would break into the building because of the smooth, shiny tile on the walls. And if you stood there and you were looking at the pictures of what the restaurant looked like, the tile's all been cleaned up. The tile's still on the walls. And you would look at the picture and you'd say, oh, that was so pretty. And then you'd look at where all the graffiti was. And then you'd look around, you'd realize, I am standing in the restaurant. They put that display where the restaurant had been. You'd look down and you'd see there were little hexagon tiles on the floor. And I was standing on the same white marble tile that hundreds of thousands of travelers had walked upon since 1913. There's an entire room decorated with posters of the artists that had either performed in Detroit or had traveled through that train station between 1913 and 1987. And it included some of the biggest names in entertainment you could think of, because people have forgotten that before Los Angeles existed, there was Detroit. Motown. Because there was New York, and then there was Detroit before anything happened in Los Angeles. And in the middle of one section is a completely rusty, yet still recognizable, drivable 1940s luggage cart that was found in the lowest level down by the train tracks. The whole thing is just flaky rust. It looks like a big giant piece of burnt chocolate cake, and it has a barricade, one of those little woven tape things around it, and signs that say, please don't touch, but you can see where people have reached over and just touched it. Because people don't follow directions, do they? There are two big pieces of concrete wall, size of this table, where the graffiti has been preserved. They're laying on a pedestal, they're facing up, so you can see the graffiti on it. For years, the train station was a mecca for some of the most talented urban artists. People would fly into Detroit and trespass into the train station to put their graffiti art on these walls. It was like a thing if you were a graffiti artist. The soaring walls, the wide open spaces, and the relatively unmonitored access meant freedom for these artists. And the Ford Company has said they will preserve some of their graffiti in space, and on part of the tour where you can access as you walk out, the wall has still got graffiti on it, which is in stark contrast to these polished marble finishes and giant chandeliers, and as you leave, there's just graffiti on the walls. And one of them actually has got a name printed on it, which we couldn't decide if it said Mom or Moon, and it says 1984 spray painted next to it, which feels really recent to me. Maybe my age is shown. But Ford has said that they'll preserve some of the graffiti in the places that it was, but the pieces on display were walls that were removed as part of the renovation process to restore it back to its original, the train station to its original configuration. And one of the stories that really brought a lot of joy to my heart was at one point, there was a brass clock that had hung on the outside gable end of the carriage house, which was a separate outbuilding at the train station. The building itself is now gone, but the clock had gone missing sometime in the 1990s. The carriage house was designed because the rich people would show up with their driver in the carriage, and the people would get out, and they would take the carriage to the carriage house where the horses would be refreshed, and the help would wait while the horses were refreshed, and then they would take the carriage back to the estate. So the carriage house had a big clock on it, and when Ford announced that they had purchased the property, a random Ford employee received a handwritten note on their vehicle detailing where this clock would be found the next day. The employee the next day went to the location, and if I recall correctly, it was like the side of the B railroad tracks at the CXS site, right? He went there, and there's the clock wrapped in moving blankets and tape.
Wow.
And this was no small clock. It was approximately 8 feet in diameter and weighed several hundred pounds. Apparently, the unknown borrower was so concerned that the clock would fall into the hands of scrappers when the train station was abandoned, officially abandoned, in 87, he borrowed the clock to protect it. And when he heard the train station was going to be restored and that Ford had bought it, he returned the clock. To this day, the borrower's identity is unknown, but what's also is unknown is how he got the clock off the building unnoticed in the first place. And for those of you who heard me talk last time, it seems I can't go to Michigan without bringing back a clock story.
I know.
It's me and clocks. I don't know what's going on. The one exhibit that really struck home for me didn't have any cool relics under plexiglass. There wasn't anything to touch or not touch. And it was basically a sign. It had about 5 paragraphs printed on it. It was talk about the history of the building, and people just walked by it, for the most part. In essence, the building was completely abandoned by 1988, although businesses had started leaving the upper floors especially some years before that. Detroit had already begun its economic decline, and there wasn't any one person held accountable. At one point, though, enough people had complained about the vandalism and the general condition of the building that the city made the decision to demolish the train station. But there wasn't any money because Detroit was broke. The city couldn't pay firefighters or teachers or garbage men. It wasn't going to tear down literally one of hundreds at that point of abandoned buildings. Ironically, the financial distress that led to Michigan Central's downfall was its saving grace. So the train station got a reprieve, and in 2018, the Ford Motor Company decided Michigan Central was worth saving, and the Ford Motor Company, which is still run by the descendants of Mr. Ford himself, spend a lot of money in philanthropical endeavors in the Detroit area. This is one of them. Ford will use part of the building for office space, but the ground floor will remain a cultural attraction and an event space. They intend on the second and third levels, I guess, will become hospitality space. They intend on opening hotel space on the upper levels, which has a sweeping view of the area, and office space on the rest of it, and developing entertainment venues and hospitality spaces in the surrounding areas of Corktown. But because Ford Motor Company did that, this beautiful grand dame of architectural elegance is back in the limelight. As for me, my recent vacation could not have been better timed. I knew I needed a break from work. I knew it. I'm a seasoned professional, which I think is a nice way of saying I'm old. But I could tell I was getting burned out. I was apathetic. I didn't want to get up from work. And at 4 o'clock, I was out the door. Didn't matter. Just, I'm not done with this task. Don't care. I'll be here tomorrow. I'm out. I needed a breather. I was happy to get on that plane. I was happy to go to a yard sale with my mother. That's how burned out I was. But I didn't realize it until it happened that I needed a break from my daily routine too. It's possible that I was so busy knowing that work was stressing me out that I stopped looking at what other issues might be a concurrent problem. Because when I got to my mom's house, I was surprised at how pleasant it was just to go to bed and sleep until I woke up, because we didn't really have a schedule. Mom didn't start yard selling until 9, because who starts a yard sale at 8? That's just ridiculous. I didn't have to worry about what was for dinner. I didn't have to make sure the dog took her medication. I didn't have to make sure the cat's litter box got emptied. Or didn't have to set my alarm clock because we just woke up when we woke up. I didn't intend for my vacation to be like that. It's just how it worked out. But I'm really glad that it did. I learned something from that experience, which is apparently what the universe had planned for me. So maybe the point of that trite topic of so many fall essays in our youth of you may have been on vacation, but come back and tell me what you learned, in essay form, of course. An oh so subtle prompt from your English teacher of old to remind you that although you may have not been in class, you were still learning something. Even if that something was you never ever want to drive with your parents and your younger brother in a 1987 Chrysler K car to New Mexico to visit your Aunt Helen ever again. If you find yourself away, on vacation, so to speak, whether it's on purpose or not, my advice to you is let yourself be for a moment. Even if you find that this struggle is in your spiritual life. I don't know if vacation is the right word here, but it's what I've got. Because there's been times in your life, I'm sure, that it's just not working. The divine inspiration isn't there. The path isn't clear. The words don't make sense. Maybe you don't even know why you feel the way that you do. Perhaps you're not even aware you're having a feeling. I know there are times when I just don't want to show up for myself or for my community. If that makes you feel bad, if you have to should yourself into going, don't should all over yourself. I'm here to tell you to stop it. Take that feeling of it or meh as a sign from the interdependent web that we all belong to, that maybe you need to shift gears or relax or maybe refocus or stop focusing altogether. Maybe it's time to throw that glove into the train. Or get rid of the trains completely and see what comes next. Thank you.